Think of something that you've spent a lot of time doing. Like any sort of skill or hobby or practice, something that you've done some development around, okay? So I want you to think it could be a job thing, it could be a hobby you have if you're a golfer or a baseball player. It could be literally just driving your car. It's so simple, okay? Just can you think for a second about something that you've spent a fair bit of time maybe doing or practicing or evolving? Okay, so stay with me here. I want you to think for a second the first time you ever did that thing, the first time you ever picked up the golf club or picked up the baseball bat, the first time you tried to play the piano, the first time you got behind the wheel of a car, maybe scary stuff, the first time you did the financial statements, or the first month running your business or managing the thing or doing whatever part of your job description there is, okay? Whatever that is. I want you to just real quick, gut reaction, rate yourself from 1 to 10. 1 being pretty lousy, pretty terrible, and 10 maybe being like the world's greatest golfer, the world's greatest manager, the world's greatest driver, Formula One, okay? What is it? What's your rating? Lock it in. And now I bet your number wasn't very high, was it? And you think, Jackson, what a brilliant insight. That's why you get paid the big bucks, right? The first time I ever did the thing, never having done it before, I wasn't very good at it. Okay, yes. Now, be honest here, because probably what's going to happen is you're going to rate yourself and be like, well, maybe I'm not actually that good. I'll drop it down a little bit. No, don't be humble here. Rate yourself now. What would you be from maybe a 1 to a 10, knowing that you're probably not a professional race car driver or a pro golfer or the CEO of Amazon or something, but right, compared to maybe when you started or compared to most people, what would you rate yourself 1 to 10 go? Okay. Now, something probably happened here, right? Probably when I do the seminars and events, right? Probably like the first number you gave yourself was something like maybe a 2 or a 3 or maybe even a 1. And then the second thing was maybe like, a 7 or 8, maybe even a 9 or 10. So listen, this is incredibly important. How on earth did you go from a 1 or a 2 to like an 8 or a 9 or a 10? So think about that is like let's say you go from a 2 to even just an 8, that is a 400%, a 4x improvement from where you started to where you are now. I mean, think about if you could do that for your income or something, right? You go from, I make, a $80,000 salary to, right, now you're making $320,000, right? That's a huge shift. How on earth did you do that? Well, I bet you did 2 things. That's right. You did only 2 things. You studied and you practiced. You studied and you practiced. Great. Think about that. Playing golf, okay? So maybe you got a coach who gave you lessons, or you watched some videos on it, or you had your buddy, this happened to me, right? I had my buddy show me how to play golf, and after a while he said, Jackson, I have some advice for you, okay? I want you to take 2 weeks off, okay, and then never try again. Okay, because I'm just lousy and I hated it. But, you had someone show you how to do it, okay? So in the neuroscience now, we're talking neuroscience here, this is called declarative learning, okay? So it's like the study, getting the knowledge and the concepts of how to do it. But that's not enough. You didn't just read the book or watch the video or even think about like high school or elementary school. Your teacher shows you how to do the math problem or how to do the thing. No, you had to practice. You had to do the homework. You had to swing the golf club and put in the rounds, right? You had to go to driver's ed. Okay, here's how you do it. You have the wheel, you turn the wheel, you press the gas. Then you actually had to get in the car and drive it, okay? So this in the neuroscience is called performative learning. And when these things come together, this is how we learn. And this is how you went from like a 2 or a 1 or a 3 to like a 10 out of 10. You studied and you practiced. In neuroscience, again, declarative learning and performative learning. So you got to like identify conceptually and understand the how to do it with training, with coaching, with videos, with textbooks, with models. And then you actually have to do the stuff, do the practices, take the action. So I always say this is a $1 billion question, not $1 million question, $1 billion question, okay? So listen up. How could happiness be any different? I mean, how could happiness be any different? Like, actually think about this, okay? If you study, remember declarative learning, the causes and conditions that lead to happiness in human beings, and then you put those causes and conditions into practice, you take actions to make them real, you will be happier. You will learn to be happier through study and practice. And now the reason I say that's a $1 billion question is about maybe A couple years ago, I went to a seminar with a very popular, what would be the term, self-improvement, coaching, that sort of thing type guy. But one of his many accomplishments, he wrote a New York Times best-selling book on money. Okay, and in that book, he interviewed, I think it was 14 billionaires with a B, billionaires. And he said, if I'm being honest, probably only like 3 or 4 of them were genuinely happy. 3 or 4. And so if you have this insight that you can learn to be happier and you actually apply it, you have something that $1 billion can't buy you. So this is a big idea here, okay? So if we understand happiness is learned, well, then that begs the question, okay, well, what are the things we need to study and practice, right? And so what I say is maybe a little bit counterintuitive. If you want to be happier, don't focus on happiness. Happiness is a waste of time. Don't focus on happiness. Focus on those ingredients for happiness. Remember, I said, right, the causes and conditions, you study and practice those. If you focus on the ingredients for happiness, happiness will arise. And there's actually some interesting research on this. Lana Catalino is a professor who talks about this a little bit, and I think it's interesting. And there's other papers that people who like obsess over happiness, or they say that happiness is very important to them, sometimes actually show lower happiness levels because they almost have like stress and anxiety around, like, you can imagine this. It's like, am I happier? Am I happy enough? Why am I not more happy? Like, I need to be happier. I'm going to, focus harder on being happier. And it's like, no, focus on the ingredients. Okay. And that same researcher, she talks about one of her models that I really like is prioritizing positivity. So it's saying, okay, well, instead of just trying to be happy or focusing on it, I'm going to prioritize investing time in activities that I know will bring me experiences of positive emotion. Focus on the ingredients. And what are those ingredients? Well, there's many ways to break it down, and my way is not necessarily the best way, but I like to keep it really simple, okay? Simple, so that you can almost have a checklist, and you can think about weaving this checklist into your daily life, your weekly life, your goal setting, if you're setting out New Year's resolutions or whatever, and just your basic inventory of your life. Biology, psychology, and relationships. I call it the BPR checklist. That's it. Okay, if you have healthy biology, that physical foundation, you have positive psychology, so your thoughts and emotions are generally more positive. They make you feel good. And you have loving, strong relationships. You almost can't help but be happier. I mean, really think about this. Like, imagine you got a guy or girl who they have they have a significant other who's a really great fit for them, and they have this great group of best friends, and they're involved in their community, and they go to church, and they play on a sports team, and so they got all of this social energy in their lives, and then every day they do some meditation, and so most of their thoughts are pretty positive. They're pretty hopeful about the future. They're pretty satisfied with what they're doing, and at work they manage their stress, and they kind of enjoy the work, and it's engaging and interesting. Okay, psychology. And then physically, they get their exercise in each week, they sleep enough, and they're eating well, and they're not abusing any drugs or alcohol. How is that person possibly going to be miserable? Like, they literally almost can't. Now, don't get me wrong, something might happen where a best friend of theirs passes away tragically, and they're going to keep doing all of those same BPR, and they're going to be sad for a little bit. But overall, right, in the long term, they're going to recover. And it's, again, almost impossible for them not to be happy. And so I'll share more on this as we go. But the key idea here, again, right, happiness is learned through study and practice. If we want to study and practice, what we need to study are the ingredients and focus on the ingredients for happiness, which are, again, biology. I mean, what really makes for happiness in terms of like a healthy biology, okay? So things like adequate exercise. Okay, both cardiovascular strength training as well as doing, stretching and whatnot to keep your mobility in check. Your nutrition, your sleep health, your immune system, even things like light and dark exposure. Some pretty interesting stuff around like getting exposed to blue light in certain periods of the night versus getting morning sunlight. Even those things impact our kind of biological health. Okay, so your exercise, your nutrition, your sleep, those are the big things there. Your psychology. I sometimes say that this is about being happy with the past, in the future, and the present. Think about that, because you can be happy in all these different dimensions of time, which is kind of interesting. Like, if you're happy with the past, that's kind of like satisfaction, right? So that comes from like a sense of meaning, a sense of achievement, a sense of being kind of content when you step back and look at your life. And so we can explore where that comes from. But also about the future, right? That's like being hopeful or optimistic. I feel good about the direction things are going. And then in the present right now, those are all the different kind of moment to moment experiences of positive emotion. It could be joy, it could be gratitude in this moment, it could be excitement, it could be fun or play. Okay, so that's your thoughts and emotions, right? When you can go across all your time zones, generally positive thoughts and emotional states, you're rocking. And then, of course, I touched on relationships. Now, this is actually, okay, I hate to be like, oh, this is the secret to happiness. This is the key to happiness. And it's more complicated than this, of course. But if there is like one thing, the top priority, maybe I should change my list to RBP, but that doesn't sound quite as good for some reason. Relationships, okay? So the Grant study at Harvard University, one of the longest running psychological studies of its kind, talked about this. But what they found was essentially that the key to happiness and how long you live and how healthy you are is the quality of your relationships. Okay. So BPR, very simple. Every day you're investing in your biology, your psychology, and relationships. Okay. And one other nuance there that you may want to consider is happiness really is kind of objective, but it's also subjective. So think about this for a second. I just talked about this model and I kind of said like this is where happiness comes from. Your biology, your psychology, and your relationships. But at the same time, isn't it true that two people can have like such incredibly different lives, but be both happy in their own way? I mean, you think about a guy like, I don't know, Shaquille O'Neal, okay? He's born this huge, strong, athletic guy. He's 7 feet tall. He loves to play basketball. He becomes a, legendary basketball player. And then maybe you got Mother Teresa, okay? Pretty tiny little lady who is really passionate about helping the poor and the sick. And you're like, what does Shaq and Mother Teresa have in common? Not a whole lot. I mean, they're both probably, from what I see, pretty darn good people, good folks. But other than that, there's no whole not a lot. But they probably are each pretty happy, or at least doing a life in alignment with what they should be doing in their own way. And so this is my invitation to you, is think about happiness is both objective. It's universal. There are certain ingredients for everyone, and yet it's subjective. It's highly personal. So think about it, maybe like we can even use nutrition as an analogy, okay? So if we think about nutrition, everything you eat, by the way, is composed of carbs, fats, and proteins. Okay, those are like where we get our calories from. And obviously there's other things in there like fiber and micronutrients, but it's like a piece of chicken and with a side of rice, okay? It's protein and fat in the chicken and then carbs in the rice. The amount of each of those that each of us need and how we want to consume them, though, are very different, right? We all need food, water, and shelter to stay alive, but we may need different amounts or different types of food, different amounts of water, different places to live. And so again, it's both subjective and objective, right? It's objective, it's universal, that we all need quality relationships. We all need to have good psychology and psychological health, and we all need good biological health. But the ways in which we may get after those are going to be totally different, right? You have someone who, on one hand, I really love weightlifting, and I'm the type of person that I need to sleep like 9 hours every night, or I just feel like, not into it. And, one of my favorite hobbies is painting. Like, I just really love to paint, and I'm like a super extrovert. Like, I love to just go out and meet new people and go to networking events. Okay, well, great. Then maybe you have a young lady who she's like, I don't really like weightlifting, but I really love to run. Like, running is just my jam. I love to get out in the woods and just go on these long jogs. But I'm also the type that I just get up super early. Like, I just get up at like 4:30 in the morning. I don't know how you do it, but like I do, and I just feel ready to go, and I just don't need that much sleep. Not as much sleep. And then in terms of like where I get my joy and engagement from, like, I just really love doing like financial analysis. I'm kind of a nerd, but I just love numbers. I know how to code. I know how to do Excel. Okay. And then finally, I'm kind of more of an introvert. I'm like a little bit shy. And so I just have my core group of my girlfriends and then my, boyfriend or whatever. And so like a pretty small group, but like we're really close, and I just love to spend time with them in like these small, intimate settings. So, right, you see what I mean? The underlying ingredients are kind of the same. You need to take care of your physiology. You need to take care of your psychology. You need to take care of the relationship dimension of life. But exactly how your life looks can be so very different. Okay, so as you watch this video, I want you to think about the objective pieces in your life, right? How are you doing in terms of each of these pillars of your biology, your psychology, and your relationships? But then also, how does this look for you in your own unique way? What is most important to you, right? Even especially an example for some people in maybe the psychology or the relationship bucket is like faith or spirituality, right? That may be a really big piece of this. Okay, some people it's more the physical stuff. There's many different ways to slice it. So you got to make it your own, but understand that the things that you want to study, okay, and then practice, really simple, BPR. I want to study, what does healthy biology look like and how do I get it? Like, what are the exercises I should be doing? And by the way, you can find all of this from me. Okay. But like, what do I need to be doing there? Psychology. Maybe I need to learn about meditation or mindfulness, or like go to therapy, or like learn about how to get more meaning in my life. And then relationships. Well, how do you actually have good relationships, right? Like, it's crazy to me that we're never taught this in school. I had to stumble through life kind of being a jackass until I read a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and it just made me like 10% less of a jackass. But you can learn in all of these things and then build practices in each one. And that is where it starts to become a little subjective of how does that look for your life, okay? So in this video, I hope what you take away more than anything is that, again, happiness is learned, and you want to focus on the ingredients: biology, psychology, relationships, which are ingredients that all human beings need in order to be happy. And yet it's subjective, it's unique to you. How do these things come to life in your life? Well, that's going to be for you to figure out, okay? Thanks for watching.